1999, a letter from India arrived at Bristol University. It came from Dhananjay Jadhav, an Inspector General in the Indian Police Service serving in Mumbai. He hoped that the university might be able to trace a group of graduate students who, nearly 40 years earlier, in 1960, had lived for a few months in his home village of Pusagan. He remembered as a schoolboy that the visitors had filmed and photographed local activities. He went on to explain that there had been great progress in his village during the past 40 years, but he and his friends found it difficult to convey to their grown-up children what the village had been like when they were young. Few photographs had been taken in the village at that time. What Dhananjay Jadhav remembered so clearly was the University of Bristol Trans-Continental expedition 1960 to 61, all of whose members are fortunately still around. Seen here, shortly before our departure for India from Bristol in 1960, these fresh-faced recent graduates had spent their final year or two at Bristol University planning a fairly ambitious trip. Dr. Don Pilton on the left, then Mark Howell, Roger Tutt, Peter Crinks, Tony Morrison, and then on the other side of the Lord Mayor, Malcolm McKernan. With the generous support of various local benefactors, the advice and support of the Royal Geographical Society and other prestigious bodies, and with the backing of the Austin Motor Company and many other commercial sponsors, the expedition was set to drive overland to India. After living for 3 months in 3 adjacent villages in Maharashtra state, the team was to go on to look at other rural development projects on the Bolivian Altiplano in South America. This old personal 8mm film footage provides some glimpses of the journey east, with the Dave Brubeck recording sometimes drifting gently out across the Turkish countryside. We got into our pretty basic camping routines. At the same time, our writer, Malcolm McKernan, managed to produce the first of the reports we had contracted to write for the Western Daily Press. And as the daytime temperatures began to soar, Dr. Don Pilton began to insist that we kept up our supplies of drinking water. The roads through eastern Turkey, Iran and Afghanistan were almost entirely unmetalled. But despite the conditions, good progress was made across Iran, through Tehran, up towards Mashhad, with the plan then to continue across the Afghan border to Herat. But then the roads did start to take their toll, and we needed all the skills of our sound recordist, Mark Howell, to get us back on the road, with good healthy nosh keeping us going too. We attracted a bit of attention from our fellow road users, but the biggest problem was the roads themselves. It was certainly good to stock up on fruit and vegetables on reaching the intriguing city of Kandahar. But all too quickly, we had spent a couple of days in Kabul, and then we were heading into the mountains and on towards the Khyber Pass. And down towards Peshawar. A sensitive area even then. In 1960, the arrival in Pakistan of an overland team like ours was sufficiently unusual to justify a welcome from the British High Commission. As they headed south towards Bombay, the team was now able to enjoy the splendours of the subcontinent. Then, reaching the shores of the Indian Ocean, Juhu Beach near Mumbai, with Bristol friends to greet us and give us somewhere to stay. But we were keen to reach our destination, the villages of Pusagan, Aund and Corrigan, all in the district of Satara. Our geographer, Peter Crinks, had been in touch from Bristol with the Gokhale Institute in Pune. The institute was concerned with agrarian reform and the rural extension program. It was with its advice that the 3 villages were chosen as a base, and it was with the institute's help that contacts were established and accommodation found, and the team began to see something of the workings of rural life in these villages on the Deccan. Of course, most of these agricultural methods from 1960 and many of the traditional crafts have now been modernized, and certainly the traditional craft of rope making by these methods can no longer be seen in the villages today. But the schools of Pusagan, Aund and Corrigan, where these gymnastics and dance scenes were filmed in 1960, are certainly just as vibrant today as they were then. This dance had been produced to illustrate for us the activities and relationships of the landlords and peasants in the villages. They came from far and wide in 1960 to the annual Pusagan Fair, a major event in the whole of the district. too soon, it was time for us to leave the villages and to bring to an end our insights into their agricultural and social activities and development. We reluctantly took our leave and headed south, eventually travelling on to South America and then back to England. The team then split up and all of us started careers in various fields, but still keeping in touch from time to time. So all that was, of course, nearly 40 years ago. So now, in 1999, it was a bit of a surprise that a letter should arrive from India. Fortunately, Tony Morrison, the photographer, in 1960, was able to confirm that some of the material taken in the villages, including Pusagayan, was indeed still available. Somehow, the idea of a return visit to Pusagayan was then hatched, and in November 2000, Tony, together with Peter Crinks and Roger Tutt, accompanied also by Vera Crinks and by Marion Morrison and Gwen Tutt, arrived in Mumbai to be given a wonderfully warm welcome by friends and colleagues of Dhananjay Jadhav. A day was spent enjoying all the sounds and sights of the great city of Mumbai. Some old and some much newer. It was then soon time to head out of Mumbai and hit the road for Pune and Satara.
I reckon through the barn, over the thing, and they went through.
After a brief stop in Pune, we were heading for Satara and for our much anticipated first meeting with Dhananjay, his wife Sheila, and with their daughters Sharu and Kirti, and with their son Ajay. As we looked down from our hotel rooms next morning, we were a bit surprised to see a large banner attached to our vehicle. Perhaps our visit to Pusagayan was going to have a slightly higher profile than we had thought. I think what we were probably all expecting was a guided tour of the village, meetings with the officials of the village committee, the Gram Panchayat, and visits to the schools we had known in 1960. But meanwhile, in Pusagayan, some quite different plans had been made by these prominent personalities and by the friends and family of Dhananjay Jadhav. Plans for which nothing could really have prepared us as we arrived that morning. For our first stop, we were honoured with a visit to the temple.
If you want to demand something, also you demand.
सुगन्ध्यं पुष्टिवर्धनं भवाहुकमिव बन्धनामहे कविं कवीनामुपमस्वं ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभ्यः शृणुयामि नमस्कार गवान नमस्कार ओमी सकल पूजा ते हळद कुंकू अक्षरा देवता ब्रह्मा निजानंद सदती
Having paid our respects to the high priest, it was then time for the first of many group photographs. For the privilege of wearing turbans, some informal greetings, and the honour of planting trees, we were then summoned to the formal speeches of welcome at the Narayan-Giri Hall. Vasant Wag, Professor of Physics at Pune University, welcomed us with great warmth and humour and introduced his school contemporary, Dhananjay Jadhav. The Inspector General had remembered every detail of our activities in 1960, but had been too shy to come and talk to us. The great progress of Pusagayan since our visit in 1960 was outlined by Sri Bhujpal of the Gram Panchayat. We then did our unprepared best to respond with the magnificently turbaned Peter explaining the interest in India in the UK in the 1960s, and going on to explain how it had come to choose the three villages of Pusagayan, Aund and Karagayan. Tony, for his part, drew warm applause with his proposal to make available on the internet in due course the photographs of Pusagayan taken in the 1960s. My recollection of the team's discomfort caused by a cobra's residence in our government rest house toilet block caused some amusement, and Gwen expressed all our thanks for the extraordinary reception we were being given. With the speeches over, we were then soon on our way to the Gram Panchayat, or local council offices, for an unexpected press conference. We did our best to field some very wide-ranging questions from a team of very able journalists, and then we received some surprisingly extensive coverage in the regional and even in the national press the next day. The welcome on the streets then continued. And this was our wonderful reception at the Pusagayan Public School. And in the afternoon to the high school. utterly stunned by all the vibrant quality of this cultural display, and we did our inadequate best to say so.
We have had the most wonderful welcome to Kyrgyzstan, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Congratulations, you are a wonderful community and a wonderful school.
The second day of our visit dawned beautifully, and we were off to the villages of Korogan and Aund, where we had lived in the government rest houses in 1960. At Korogan, we were so pleased to meet the leading members of the community who turned out to tell us all about life in the village today. And to our delight, they included Dr. Katra, the retired headmaster of Korogan School. As one of the school teachers in 1960, he had produced the dance illustrating rural life in the village and the activities and the relationship of the landlord and peasants. And he could still remember the words today.
Pulia Aila, Bigi Bigi Tsala, was the beginning of that folk song. It's a folk song describing the improvement of a society. The farmer is at the center of the social pillar, and all these balutas and alutas, that means the potters and other persons, just help him in raising the village.
Our hosts kindly provided many interesting insights into the education and health services in the area, with Dr. Katra noting the progress made in education for girls.
We are doing something or the other just to educate the boys from rural area, just to bring girls to the schools and just to educate them. And still I am here. So throughout these 44 years, I note one changing pattern. In those days, money was short, but love was in abundance. Yes, now the vice versa is there.
All too soon, it was time to move on, and with generous gifts from our hosts, we then headed out on the road to Aund.
This is a better view, Tony.
At Aund, we were welcomed by the Gram Panchayat in the government rest house where we had stayed in 1960. Aund's fine hilltop temple provides some great views of the area around the village. Just down the hill from the temple is Aund's remarkable Bhavani Museum, whose curator kindly provided a conducted tour of the extraordinary wide range of sculpture and paintings and documents collected by a former Raja of Aund. There was then a date to keep at Aund School. The Rani Sahiba of Aund was the principal guest. After the wonderful cultural display at Aund School, there was an unexpected invitation to take tea with the Rani of Aund at the grand house where, 40 years earlier, her late husband's father, the then Raja of Aund, had sometimes consulted our doctor, Don Pilton. The Rani's husband was tragically killed in a motorcycle accident a year or two earlier. The Rani is now attempting to work out how to maintain a crumbling palace on her own. Then quickly back to Pusagayan to see before nightfall one of the farms near the village where the benefits of recent irrigation schemes are very obvious. And as always, so many knowledgeable and friendly people to answer our many questions. Time then for an early evening visit to Pusagayan police station for a generous welcome from the impressive men and women of the local police force. Later that evening, we were to enjoy a very special party at the home of Dhananjay and Sheila Jadav, with Vera, Marion and Gwen generously provided with new saris for the occasion. This was, of course, another great opportunity for us to chat to the Jadav family and to their close friends and colleagues. So pleased to be able to meet Dhananjay's mother and his father. It was a great evening, and on top of all this, we were able to enjoy a deliciously varied range of local dishes, all prepared for us by Sheila and the family. As we began the third day of our visit, it was bright and clear over the river at Satara. And clearly it was a good morning for a little rickshaw washing. We were going to start the day with a closer look at the agriculture around Pusagayan, so it was appropriate that en route we were able to catch a view of one of the large sugar factories now operating in the area. We walked in the gentle hills above Pusagayan. It was quickly apparent how much local agriculture had been improved in the past 40 years, partly as a result of improved and extended irrigation. In November, the groundnuts and ginger are ready to harvest. Here we're looking at a reforestation project on part of the Jadav family land. As always, the Indian rural landscape is full of interest and vibrant colour. Tank has been making a contribution to the water supplies and irrigation of Pusagayan for some time, as this plaque records. Some 15,000 labourers were employed as part of a famine relief scheme for its construction in 1881. But now it was time for a little lunch. This Pusagayan village lunch was another very special occasion and a great opportunity to meet people. We marveled at how such a delicious meal could be served to so many people with such great efficiency. Before the next and final event on the program, there was just time for a quick look around the village on a Saturday afternoon. And then on to the final event. Turbans and with the splendid sorrows in evidence, we were to be bidden farewell with generous but undeserved words and even more generous gifts. As we headed towards the platform, we all knew that we had been the fortunate recipients of 3 days of village hospitality that was extraordinary even in a country renowned for its hospitality to visitors. But in addition to that wonderful hospitality, it had become clear to us over the 3 days that our return visit had in fact provided a timely opportunity for the village to come together as a community, to tidy up a bit, and to celebrate. Somehow, that celebration had sparked enormous community enthusiasm, and we were the very, very lucky recipients.
Things must come to an end sometime or the other.
As we all finally stood for the Indian national anthem, our sense of gratitude to our hosts and to the village for our being at the center of all this was, of course, just immense. But that wasn't the end of the fun, nor of our host's generosity. After a really interesting evening at the home of District Police Superintendent Power and Mrs. Power, we were off to Pune, where Professor Varg was kind enough to provide us with great hospitality and with many fascinating insights into all the aspects of the ancient but very modern city of Pune. As an extra bonus, Dhananjay and Sheila decided to accompany us to nearby Ahmednagar, where Marion Morrison had a bit of family research to do. As we travelled, the signs of the Indian government's policy of extending IT to all the villages of India was evident from the trenches being dug to take the fibre optic cable. There were also clear signs of the terrible drought afflicting Gujarat and Rajasthan as these herdsmen migrated south with their cattle from Gujarat. Then, armed with a photograph that included Marion's grandparents at a monument near Ahmednagar in 1919, we were off to visit that location.
Actually, just to try and imagine what it really was like then, you know. I did wonder how they actually would have made the journey up here, because there were so many of them. A handful probably would have ridden.
We then did a bit of photographic restaging, and later Marianne was able, with the help of Dhananjay's detective colleagues, to locate the bungalow where it's at least possible that her grandparents once lived. And then it really was time to say a final sad farewell to Sheila and Dhananjay.
Well, well.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, I think for once, could I please borrow your camera?
You can do whatever you like. Wait a sec.
We're staying like this. No, well, it's just, he's been behind the camera the whole time.
Before leaving the state of Maharashtra, we were going on to see the ancient caves at Ajanta and Ellora, both World Heritage Sites.
Yes, they dug it out right from the top, and then limited everything else until they came down here. And so it was carved downwards.
As we then flew down to Mumbai before flying on to Udaipur to visit Rajasthan, we carried with us great memories of new friendships and of a week of enormous fun.